The Dogfighter. What drives this? Recently, in the United Kingdom at least, there has been some consternation expressed about the American Bully XL dog as a consequence of people losing their lives having been mauled by this particular breed. Many people make the point that it's bad owners, not bad dogs, that are the problem. And you may well form the same view here in relation to an individual who has been keeping or breeding dogs for the purposes of having them fight. Despite such activity being unlawful, there are individuals that flout the law, having no accountability for their behaviours, to ensure that they breed dogs or purchase them and keep them for the purposes of fighting. Here, in accordance with an article from Caitlin Dornbos from the New York Post, senior Pentagon official ran vicious dogfighting ring and executed the losers with jumper cables. A senior Defense Department official ran a vicious dogfighting ring and used jumper cables to execute animals that lost in the savage battles, according to recently released court documents. Frederick Douglass Moorfield Jr., age 62, the Pentagon's Deputy Chief Information Officer for Command, Control and Communications, is charged with promoting and furthering animal fighting venture, the Maryland U.S. Attorney's Office announced on Monday. Now, it's important to emphasize that there is no conviction in relation to Mr. Moorfield, although the evidence does look fairly compelling. The investigation into Moorfield, who named his dogfighting business Jihad, spelt Geehad, Geehad Kennels, an apparent homophone for jihad, as in holy war, began in 2018 when Anne Arundel, County Animal Control, discovered the bodies of two dogs in plastic bags that included mail addressed to his Arnold home, according to a recently unsealed affidavit in the case. The distribution and number of recent and healed dog bite wounds present on both dogs was consistent with organised dogfighting, an FBI agent wrote in the affidavit. Based on this information, I believe that Moorfield sponsored each of these dogs in a dog fight. The treatment of the animals in this way, of course, demonstrates an absence of emotional empathy, a sense of entitlement to treat them in this fashion. Veterinary medical examiners were unable to determine the dogs' causes of death, but the investigator believes Moorfield killed them himself if they did not die in a fight, according to the report. Again, if that is accurate, that would demonstrate an absence of emotional empathy. Individuals who sponsor dogs for dog fighting often kill dogs that lose a fight, and as a result of these fights, I believe the dogs were killed during the fight or that Moorfield killed each of them afterwards for performing poorly, the investigator added. Again, if that is accurate, the fact of treating an animal in that way is demonstrative of an absence of emotional empathy, treating the dog as an object that is there to do what this individual requires. It would also suggest that the failure of the dog to perform appropriately impacts upon the status and the necessity of control that Moorfield is likely to require, with the consequence that he responds to nullify that threat by killing the dog. Moorfield is accused of being involved in dogfighting throughout his career as a civilian employee for the Defense Department, which began in October 2008. So the suggestion is that he's been engaging in this behaviour for the last 15 years, which would show a sustained pattern of behaviour, i.e. it's not a one-off, and therefore his behaviour isn't driven by situation or circumstance. His behaviour is driven by a pathological set of behaviours. It started when he was hired as Director of Strategic Planning for the Air Force Spectrum Management Office. Since then, he has held various Pentagon leadership positions before taking on his current role in March 2020. He also served 9 years in the Air Force before leaving the service in 1998. Pentagon spokesman Lieutenant Commander Tim Gorman confirmed that the DoD is aware of the criminal complaint but declined to say whether Moorfield remained employed in his position. We can confirm that the individual is no longer in the workplace, but we cannot comment further on an individual personnel matter, Gorman said. In his current position, Moorfield provides technical expertise, oversight and broad guidance on policy, programmatic and technical issues related to worldwide military communication networks, and advises on efforts to achieve and maintain information dominance for the Department of Defense, according to the affidavit. Moorfield's involvement in dogfighting dates back actually more than 2 decades before prosecutors filed charges against him on September the 26th. In a search on his cell phone, investigators discovered Moorfield listed at least 18 dogs on a dogfighting pedigree website dating back to at least 2002. In a September the 6th search of his home, the FBI discovered 5 pit bull dog-type dogs kept in small, thick metal cages in a windowless room in the unfinished portion of his basement, according to the affidavit. Again, that would suggest a lack of emotional empathy to treat the animals in this way. The room holding the seized dogs contained items generally used to train dogs for fighting, including weighted collars and heavy metal chains, the investigator wrote. Agents observed an apparatus that was used for involuntary inseminating female dogs. Investigators also found a device consisting of jumper cables attached to an electrical plug used to electrocute a dog after losing a fight, the ends of which were covered in dog hair and blood, according to the affidavit. Accordingly, this demonstrates further cruelty meted out towards an animal. Further, treating the animal as an object, an absence of emotional empathy, a sense of entitlement. During the search, Moorfield admitted to using the Jihad alias and said his barber had been watching his dogs the previous weekend. He also allegedly falsely told investigators, use of lie, that animal control authorities had already visited his home and observed his dogs. Revision of history. To support his dogfighting operation, Moorfield is accused of placing his dogs on treadmills, feeding them performance-enhancing drugs such as steroids and specialized dog food, and strapping them into weighted vests embroidered with the name Jihad Kennels, according to the report. In Moorfield's iCloud account, I found multiple photographs taken in or around March 2023 of what appear to be fighting dogs in cages and or wearing weighted collars consistent with those used to train fighting dogs, the agent wrote. In encrypted messages, Moorfield reportedly conspired with associates to plan dogfights, referring to his female dogs as hoes. He also spoke about refereeing other dogfights in Baltimore. FBI agents also discovered bloodstains from dogfights held at Moorfield's home, as well as syringes and a medical staple gun meant for closing wounds. Several of the fights lasted more than an hour, with some of his dogs killing their competitors in the matches. The fights also took place in multiple states, including Maryland and New Jersey, and involved bets of at least $1,500, according to messages investigators discovered on his iPhone. Moorfield faces charges of participating in, promotion of, and conspiracy to participate in an animal fighting venture, as well as interstate travel in aid of racketeering enterprises. Prosecutors also accuse Moorfield's Glen Burnie-based barber Mario Damon Flythe, 49, of the same charges. During a search, investigators seized 7 dogs from Flythe's property, at least one of which he admitted was a puppy Moorfield had bred and given to him. Agents also discovered dogfighting paraphernalia, including weighted collars and a treadmill at the barber's home. I've explained elsewhere in a video, do narcissists love their animals, as to the views of narcissists towards those animals and why they may appear on the face of it to having a loving relationship with them. But here, this is the clear abuse of animals. The fact is that there are various methods of cruelty towards animals, which would include acts of cruelty, acts of violence, abandonment, and one of those is the torturing of bulls, for instance, in bullfighting would be seen as a form of animal abuse, neglectful breeders who cage animals inhumanely in the same way that Moorfield has. But what personality is behind somebody who willfully abuses animals? Well, it's often the case that those individuals demonstrate aggression, and they have a natural tendency themselves to respond with violence to the stimuli in their environment. For instance, if a person is frustrated or angry, they are likely to take out their anger or frustration through physical violence towards the animal, often because the animal can't fight back. This would be, for instance, where if the animal isn't performing as it should do, the individual concerned, fury is ignited. They invariably have a low threshold over that ignited fury, resulting in them lashing out and harming the animal in this way. It's often the case as well that impulsiveness is seen. Acts of abuse or violence towards a person or animal are also related to a lack of control over their actions, which is demonstrative of a low control threshold for the particular individual. Impulsiveness is often also seen as a psychopathic trait. Low emotional intelligence is often seen with such individuals because of the absence of emotional empathy. The fact is that Moorfield's not able to identify and reflect the emotional state of the dogs, or indeed other people. There's also the possibility of him maintaining a situation of power through control. Because the pet doesn't obey, then he as an abuser exercises violence against them as a means to assert control over them. It's clear that there's a narcissistic trait of selfishness, because the individual is only thinking of his own needs and only carries out actions which are benefiting himself, and therefore is likely to perpetrate acts of cruelty against animals with the mere objective of carrying out his own whims, i.e. the pursuit of the prime aims. It's also that such individuals exhibit defiance, which is also a narcissistic trait. By acting against laws and social mores in the abuse of animals, they also tend to enjoy doing so, therefore enhancing their abusive tendencies. This is because they consistently ignore or challenge the well-being of others that are around them. Moorfield clearly exhibits difficulty in understanding the suffering of others in the way that he's acts with cruelty towards animals, and it's highly likely that he behaves in a cruel manner towards human beings also. The fact is that this individual is more than likely a narcissist for the way that he has bred these dogs, kept them in captivity, caused them to be harmed, has in effect visited them with abuse by the way that he has treated them to create aggression in them, but also with regard to the way that he's caused them to fight other dogs. And therefore, where a dog is lost, rather than look after it and tend to its wounds, he has instead killed it. He's likely to possibly think that he's putting it out of its misery, but in actual fact, it's more likely that he sees them as a failure, and therefore that it is appropriate to kill the animal because it's let him down, i.e., it's threatened his status and thus threatened his need for control. We don't have more information about Moorfield, but given these behaviours of animal cruelty over many years, it's undoubtedly the case that we're viewing a narcissist, and quite possibly somebody that exhibits psychopathic traits. A one-off act of cruelty towards an animal does not provide us with any determinative information. We, of course, don't have any information about how Moorfield behaved towards other people, other than telling lies to the authorities and seeking to mislead them. I should imagine that if we found out more information about him, we would see a raft of other behaviours that would accord with those that is often seen with a narcissist. And we may also see further information that would support the presence of psychopathic tendencies also. But unpleasant as this situation may be, it provides you with further understanding as to what type of personality is behind the psychology involved in animal cruelty, particularly in the case of an individual who is a dog fighter. Moorfield will see them as the dogs as an extension of himself, aggressive, champions, and would feel particular elation through the provision of fuel at his dog causing the death of another. There's also the monetary gain that's obtained by selling the dogs, breeding the dogs, and of course betting on them. When a dog loses, it threatens his sense of control and therefore must be punished. His is a very rudimentary approach, and notwithstanding the fact that he held down a decent job, demonstrates what was going on behind this particular facade with regard to clear animal cruelty. This gives you insight into what goes on with somebody who is a dog fighter, and how narcissism again is prevalent with regard to the activities of this individual. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.